President Trump likes to put his faith in his favorite field marshal of Pakistan. What do you see their role over here in this mediation process?
Frankly, I see it as bizarre. Pakistan is going to be mediator. It makes little sense in my view. And I see it as a lost opportunity of the BRICS countries. Prime Minister of India, the President of Russia, the President of China speak to Mr. Trump and explain this is not right, this is not working, this has to stop, rather than seeing this as the great chessboard or battlefield of the great powers.
The Roosevelt Hotel, that's in Manhattan. Now, this was announced by Steve Witkoff that the American government and the Pakistan government are going to jointly redo, and then eventually Pakistan is being seen on the high table in this West Asia war.
Any one of these incidents would have been enough to stop government in the United States in past decades. It is now out of control. These gangsters don't know how to run anything. That's the reality.
Do you see Saudi Arabia or UAE also getting into the war anytime soon?
Dubai and Abu Dhabi could be blown up if the UAE gets into the war. These are not fortified missile defense areas, and to enter a war zone is to defeat the entire purpose of a place like Dubai.
New York Times had an article about President Trump and PM Modi having a telephone call and discussing the West Asia crisis, but for some reason Elon Musk was on this call as well. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs has gone ahead and denied that India was aware of this. It was a bilateral call. What do you do in a situation like this when an American businessman is also on a head of state call?
The most powerful interest group in the United States is Silicon Valley. For whatever reason Musk was on that call, it is a reflection of this fact of who's really in charge in what effectively is a collapse of the constitutional order of the United States.
Professor Jeffrey Sachs, a world-leading economist, foreign policy expert, and someone everyone goes to get their first principles right about U.S. foreign policy, the world policy in general. And especially now with the Iran war, everyone is turning to him. So thank you, Professor, for joining the ANI broadcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I'll get straight into it. So today we're recording March 28th, which is a Saturday, and the Houthis have fired at Israel. There are reports that Iran has struck a U.S. base in Saudi Arabia, which has led to, injuries of American soldiers. And it just seems that the war is escalating every day. Where do you think we are heading, Professor?
Well, we are heading towards further escalation because the U.S. And Israel are determined to win a war that they can't win. So they continue escalating. Where we could be heading, of course, is to end this debacle, this disaster, which is hitting the whole world. This is an unnecessary war, to say the least. This is a war of choice, but you could call it a war of whim, a whim of Netanyahu and Trump that was cautioned against by their own advisors, that is opposed by the American public, that is viewed in horror by almost the entire world, because this is a war of losers worldwide, not of anybody really winning. But the U.S. and Israel cannot achieve their aims, which is essentially to take control over Iranian politics. And as long as they persist in that delusion, the costs to the world will be profound. We have two leaders that are mentally unstable, that are narcissists and megalomaniacs, Trump and Netanyahu, and they have been steering things towards disaster.
Mm-hmm. With the addition of the Houthis now, it's to be seen if they continue being as belligerent as they usually are. Do you foresee, and there has been reporting on this, do you see Saudi Arabia or UAE also getting into the war anytime soon?
They will be destroyed even more rapidly if they get into the war. Basically, they have fixed, vulnerable, highly visible facilities, whether it's the oil fields, whether it is their port facilities, whether it is the pipelines, the refineries. So they're utterly vulnerable. Here, a major U.S. military base was hit, and obviously with a lot of injuries and probably deaths that have not been reported. It shows how completely vulnerable the Gulf region is. They bet everything on the United States being their protector. This is always the wrong move. This is probably the single most predictable fact of the world scene in decades. You side with the United States, you lose. The U.S. is gambling. It's trying to preserve its hegemony. It doesn't have that hegemony anymore. It can't defeat Iran. It can't defeat the Houthis. And so to side with the United States, to double down and enter the war, for example, if you're the Emirates or the Saudis, is to be destroyed in a short period of time. Iran has a lot more missiles than the United States has anti-missile defenses. So this makes no sense for them. They're on the wrong side. They bet wrongly.
Were you surprised by the lethality of these Iranian missiles? It did take us by surprise. We did hear that there was a laundry fire in the USS Gerald R. Ford, but yesterday, President Trump in his speech did confirm that Iranian missiles did attack the US carrier, and he did say that they were intercepted. But one puts two and two together. A fire puts an entire aircraft carrier out of commission. That includes all the military hardware on that boat. And then we're also seeing pinpoint precision attacks by Iran on all these Saudi bases, on radar systems, not to mention the long-range missile capabilities that is hitting the center of Israel. So what explains this precision lethality? And did we underestimate, or did the US and Israel underestimate Iran's capabilities?
Of course, there was a profound underestimation, or even a more profound miscalculation, that killing the supreme leader of Iran and top government officials would be the end of the story on the first day, that a decapitation strike would be enough to bring down the regime and enable, as Donald Trump himself said in one of the most delusional statements, that he would pick the next leader of Iran. So we have, both in Israel and in the United States, a breakdown of competence at the top level. In other words, these miscalculations are not the result of sophisticated analyses. The miscalculations in the United States are the result of an incompetent old man calling the shots, together with people like Pete Hegseth, who is an utter incompetent and fool, and a few others who are completely out of their depths. Steve Witkoff, Kushner, come on. This is a group, a small group, that has commandeered power in the United States. They think like gangsters. They have no expertise. They have no deep knowledge. We in the public are not privy to all that's said, but we read about the leaks every day, and we see resignations like Mr. Kent on occasion. What we can gather is that Trump was advised by the professionals against all of this, but he simply overrode the actual cautious advice. This, I think, is what happened. Now, when it comes to the actual military capabilities, I'm a lowly economist, so I can't give you definitive answers on this. But again, if you keep your eyes open, you read, listen, and think. When the 12-day war took place last summer, it was clear that the Israeli anti-missile defenses failed on multiple occasions. We saw the sites of the Weizmann Institute, a high-value target, being destroyed, one of the key buildings, by Iranian missiles. We saw many other hits, and we had reports at that time that even in those 12 days, Israel ran short of anti-missile defenses. And so after that, there was the propaganda in the Western media that the U.S. had won the 12-day war, it had obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity and so forth. But those of us who just watched critically and tuned out the propaganda, which is relentless and just nonstop in our world right now, could see that this was simply not the case. They didn't even know where the enriched uranium of Iran actually was. We could see that nothing had been obliterated. We could listen to experts like Ted Postal at MIT explain that Iran, within a few days, if it chose to do so, could enrich the uranium that it had up to 10 nuclear bombs. So we could see that we're living in a propagandistic environment where the claims that were made were not true. And that lingered until this latest round. And frankly, in this sense, I'm not surprised, because we had learned last summer that the Iron Dome wasn't so iron after all, and could see with our own eyes. I think what is notable this time, of course, is that Iran went after all of the Gulf facilities, which were also just easy targets. And there's a lot more to come of those targets. Basically, Dubai and Abu Dhabi could be blown up if the UAE gets into the war. These are resort areas. These are tourist destinations. These are not fortified missile defense areas. These are places where rich people are going to party and put their money. And to enter a war zone is to defeat the entire purpose of a place like Dubai. The Emirates got itself into an absurd mess with its eyes open, and it keeps doubling down, by the way, entering the so-called Abraham Accords, basically siding with Israel and the United States in such fraught political circumstances, was an invitation to disaster for the Emirates. But the point is, these governments in the Gulf bet everything on American protection. That's their basic bet. They said, we have the U.S. military facilities, they will protect us, therefore we can act as we see fit, we can make deals as we see fit, and we don't have to worry. This is a fundamental miscalculation. Every day I repeat Kissinger's famous adage, and I'll repeat it at this point as well, that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. Well, this is the point. I've said it for years with regard to Ukraine. I begged my Ukrainian friends, don't believe you're going to be safe because the U.S. is backing you. I said it to Gulf leaders, actually, in the past year before this happened. What are you doing? Why aren't you aiming for a true political settlement in the region? No, the United States has our back. The U.S. is going to give us NVIDIA chips. We're going to get data centers. All sorts of glorious ideas, all proved devastatingly wrong in the last few days. This is really the problem. Well, not the problem. This is the reality, I would say. The idea that the U.S. is hegemon, that can call the shots, that it has such dominant power that it cannot be resisted, actually was proved wrong already 60 years ago in Vietnam. And it's been proved wrong repeatedly since then. In Afghanistan, of all places, in Iraq, in all of the raging wars of the Middle East that continue, where resistance that you think couldn't possibly beat the United States military machine, does a very handy job of it. So that is the backdrop that we should start with. The skepticism that there's some overwhelming power, that Donald Trump is world emperor, that he can choose the leader of Iran. When you look at this, you should just start with the sense this is delusional and then work backwards from there.
Professor Sachs, now let me give you a hypothetical over here. It's almost like a comparison over here. So the American economy, from our reading, there's an AI bubble that's going on. Now, that's predicated on a lot of money funded by these GCC sovereign wealth funds. There's a lot of money from the Gulf states, that trillions over the past decades that have flowed into American investments. And on the other hand, you have Israel's phenomenal lobbying power. President Trump, I mean, if you can speculate, when he weighs both of these interests, which way do you think he's going to go? He's already in the fourth week of his war now, and he claims that he's won it. Now, when you weigh both of these, that one hand, the American economy is being propped up, a part of it at least, by this Gulf money, and on the other hand, Israel's agenda to essentially do away with Iran, what do you think happens next?
Well, let me say also with respect to the AI bubble, of course, artificial intelligence is a real breakthrough and it has real economic merit. But again, it's a little bit like the military situation. The idea that the United States dominates, that it's going to run the world in AI is, of course, fatuous. I was just in China last week. They are completely pure competitors and ahead in many, many areas. And that's a real calculation. So the idea that you're going to pour endless money and it's going to be an endless return in AI to begin with is, as you said, most likely a bubble, perhaps a very significant bubble. And interestingly, the Emirates, which I wish well, I don't want to be misunderstood. I have gone often to Abu Dhabi and Dubai almost every year, several times in the last 10 or 20 years. So I don't want to be misunderstood, but the naivete of this, announcing yesterday, we're going to join this effort against the evil Iranians, and we're going to continue to honor our commitment to put trillions of dollars into the United States. Come on, enough. Protect yourself. Understand the situation. You think that doubling down on a losing proposition is really the right way to proceed at this point? But that's exactly what they're doing. When you ask how Trump weighs things, I think actually, and seriously, and it also sounds a bit petulant on my side, but I think it's true. This is a stupid man. This is not a man making detailed, sophisticated calculations. From everything I know, and I don't know him personally, but I know a lot of people who do know him personally. I do know a lot of people who interact with him. This is an old man, impetuous, impulsive, not knowledgeable, easily swayed, and unable to pay attention to briefings, unable to study a problem. So in weighing things, I don't believe that we're actually seeing a rational calculator making difficult, complex calculations. I think we are seeing an impulsive old man who is way out of his depths, surrounded by the least competent group that I have ever seen in American politics. And that's saying a lot, by the way, because we are not a competently run.
He's pretty savvy to economic shocks, though. He does react to when they're...
He's sensitive, but not savvy.
Right.
He's sensitive to them. So yes, that's why he can swerve and lie and confabulate day by day if he sees the stock market going down. Well, that's not savvy. That is just reactive, vulnerable, and impulsive. He's scared. And scared may not be the right word. Delusional might be he thinks he's in control in a situation that he's not in control. And so I think he makes up things. When we saw the calling off of the 48-hour warning,
the pause.
He didn't say, I'm calling it off because of circumstances and we're going to pursue other approaches. He said, we've had 2 days of detailed negotiations and we've essentially settled the political issues. We're close to a deal. Now, how can one interpret a statement like that? I think it's a fascinating question, which was completely ignored. Everybody said, well, he needed a quick off-ramp because the markets were tanking. Some people said this is an opportunity to front-run the markets and make a lot of money, which perhaps is also true. But I take a different question on this. The President of the United States makes a statement that is completely false and demonstrably so within moments. What does one make of that? It's not sophisticated lying. It's not deception. It's not Machiavellian politics. It is making a statement that is disproved in a moment. To my mind, that by itself is a pathology that should be analyzed directly. What does it mean? Well, the easiest interpretation is that he's an inveterate liar, and nobody doubts that. But there's another interpretation, which is that he is delusional, that at this stage he is confabulating. And when I listen to sophisticated psychiatrists and psychologists talk about Trump's mental state, they say that he is mentally unstable, suffers from what is called the dark triad personality of psychopathy, extreme narcissism, extreme chronic and impulsive lying, and no small amount of paranoia. And then they go on to say, at least some of them that I find quite credible, that there's evidence that this man is experiencing dementia on top of these lifelong traits. He's an old man, and he can't finish sentences coherently. Often he can't finish words coherently. That apparently, according to the psychologists, is a sign of frontotemporal dementia. I think this is not uninteresting from a geopolitical reality because we tend to normalize anything. We think he's making calculations. We ask what his next move is. I don't find this the right approach. I find, more importantly, the fact that we have a breakdown of any kind of rational process in the most powerful country in the world, the far more dangerous, likely reality right now, that this does not make sense, that this is not savvy calculations, that this is not a stable situation, that this is an extremely dangerous situation by a small group flailing around completely out of its depths. And when I add in Mr. Netanyahu, whom I regard as the world's greatest war criminal at large today, who has instigated wars across his region for, again, to my mind, malignant ideas and delusional ideas, then I think the situation is even more fraught. In other words, maybe I'm wrong, and often what I'm saying is not the right way to think about problems like this, but I think that there's a strong personalistic element to this crisis right now, which also would suggest a different kind of approach. What I'm suggesting every day is that the Prime Minister of India, the President of Russia, the President of China speak to Mr. Trump and explain this is not right, this is not working, this has to stop. rather than seeing this as the great chessboard or battlefield of the great powers, that this is a delusional environment where the chief delusional figure, Mr. Trump, needs to be helped to stop the disaster that the United States has caused.
You took the name of these three countries, but President Trump likes to put his faith in his favorite field marshal of Pakistan. What do you see their role over here in this mediation process? It got rejected by Iran initially, and I think they're still going on.
Frankly, I see it as bizarre. And I see it as a lost opportunity of the BRICS countries because India has the presidency of the BRICS. He can speak to Mr. Trump. The BRICS represent half of humanity. They represent the superpowers. They represent the rapidly growing part of the world economy. They would be listened to. The idea that this has somehow become Pakistan's base for negotiation is, in a way, because India let this happen. It did not find an effective response as it should have right from the beginning. And I think it's not effective. It can't really work this way. It should not work this way. And again, I appeal to the BRICS countries because that is a grouping that is powerful, sensible, has a clarity, wants to defend a true international system. And again, looking from the outside, it seems to have been waiting on India. I don't know if that's true, but that's the perception that Russia and China and Brazil and South Africa and others are saying we have to intervene as a group, make a statement. But at least one narrative is that India, with the prime minister just having come back from Israel of all places, was resistant to intervene to help the United States stand down, and that delayed things. And then suddenly we read that Pakistan is going to be mediator. It makes little sense in my view.
What do you think the contours of a talk like that would be? Like, what would these countries tell President Trump to A, stop, not go ahead with an invasion, and B, what would the contours of a deal with Iran look like that would be palatable to America, where America salvage its honor and Iran continues in the way it is with a missile production program or a nuclear program that may not precipitate another war down the line?
Well, I think that it's quite clear that several things are rather complicated and on the table right now. The first is that Iran does not want to be attacked once again in a brazen way. Iran has been the target of U.S. sanctions and war efforts for actually more than 45 years at this point. Ever since the Iranian Revolution, the United States has been trying regime change in one way or another. Right after the 1979 revolution, the United States financed and armed Iraq to attack Iran in what became an 8-year war. From 1979 onward, the United States has imposed sanctions on finances, on individuals, on Iranian trade and business. Iran understands this, although I have to say they themselves were rather naive at many points. I spoke to Iranian senior diplomats, and I felt they were very soft in a way, that they thought we can negotiate with the United States. And I could only tell them, don't trust the United States. They don't keep their word at all. And twice now during negotiations, the United States and Israel have attacked them. So I assume that they won't do that again. So in order for this war to stop, not only does the United States have to stop its attack clearly, but there needs to be security arrangements. Iran says no more American bases in the Gulf. If I were the leaders of Bahrain or the Emirates or the Saudis, I would invite the United States go home. You're not really protecting us. We're just targets for attack. This I would have told them before this war. In fact, I did. I don't believe in having American military bases as a means of protection. I think it is only a means of losing one's sovereignty as fast as possible. So, and becoming a target for attack. I told that to the Ukrainians for many years as well. So my point is that Iran needs security arrangements. This is for sure. Iran has said, it said it for the last 25 years. They don't want a nuclear weapon. I don't know whether that is still the view, by the way, because after you've been attacked so many times, you may change your mind. But there's no doubt that repeatedly the Iranians said, we want to be under International Atomic Energy Agency scrutiny, but we want not to be tricked and punished and attacked for that as well. So that's a second issue. Go back to the JCPOA, which was a valid agreement that Trump and Netanyahu ripped up in 2018. That's the predicate to everything that's happening right now.
It was 4% enrichment that the agreement talked about at that time, the JCPOA.
Yes, yes. There were absolute limits. The Omani intermediary in the recent round of negotiations that was truncated by this war said that the Iranians had made further major concessions on enrichment, and the war came the next day because the United States is not really interested in this, and Israel's not really interested in this issue. They're interested in regime change rather than negotiation. And then the truth of the matter is ultimately this war, like wars that have taken place now for the last 30 years from Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, Iran. These are wars that Israel has called for and induced the United States to join because Israel, in a mad way, is a crazy way, is trying to expunge the Palestinian people. And the way that it's doing that is to overthrow any government that supports the Palestinians. This is explicit policy of Israel. It goes back decades. It's a doctrine that Netanyahu introduced 30 years ago called clean break. This war is part of that strategy. My view for decades, and even more today, is that the only way to really end these wars is for Israel to live within its borders of the 4th of June, 1967, which are the internationally legally recognized borders, and for there to be a state of Palestine next door. And that should be part of a settlement. Of course, this is easy to achieve on the one side. The United States simply has to drop its veto in the UN Security Council to the state of Palestine becoming a member state of the United Nations. The U.S. is the only barrier to this. Of course, at a deeper level, the United States has to tell Israel, the game is up. Your 30-year effort to expunge the Palestinian people has proved to be a disaster, stretching from Libya to Iran. The whole region is aflame. It's over. There will be a state of Palestine, and you have to accept that fact.
And maybe sign the NPT as well, Israel?
Yeah, I don't think that they can sign it. They'll still have all of their nuclear weapons, so they may or may not sign it. But the point is, Israel's not going to give up its nuclear weapons. If we hold our breath for that, we're basically saying that there is no diplomacy at all, which may be the actual outcome. I would not hold out for that, but what I would say is that a state of Palestine would also end the complete breakdown between the Arab Gulf region and Iran on the other side, because this is their fight ultimately has been because of Israel's role within the region, which has been absolutely destabilizing.
Just today's New York Times had an article, and this was about President Trump and PM Modi having a telephone call and discussing the West Asia crisis. But for some reason, Elon Musk was on this call as well. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs has gone ahead and denied that India was aware of this. It was a bilateral call. Now, like you said that people from China, Prime Minister of Modi, President Xi, Russian president could talk to Trump and maybe talk some sense into what's going on over here. What do you do in a situation like this when an American businessman is also on a head of state call?
Frankly, I've not seen this story yet.
The New York Times.
It shows to me one major point, which is that we have almost a complete, if it's true, and I assume that it is, as the way you're describing it to me, we have almost a complete collapse of normal governance in the United States. It looks like a big, powerful federal government, but there is no structural decision-making anymore. This is somehow a small gang at the top of this apparatus. That's one point. I have no idea what Elon Musk is doing on this call. I used to call him the Prime Minister of the United States when he was hanging around in the early days of the administration. Silicon Valley paid for this government. This is another feature of the breakdown of the American political system. In addition to everything else, the security state, the secrecy, the ability for a small group to take control of American power, the American system is completely corrupted. It's corrupted by outside money because we have created a political system in which it is the billions of dollars of campaign money that determines the policies of people in power. So you buy policies. The Israel lobby is just one part of that story. But in our reality today, the most powerful interest group in the United States is Silicon Valley. And they are very powerful for a couple of reasons. One, 10 people led by Elon Musk, just 10 people have a net worth of $2.6 trillion.
Yes.
That's a lot of money. That's enough to buy the U.S. government, to have put Mr. Vance into the vice presidency, to essentially own this administration. So that is one part. They're using that for cashing in on Pentagon contracts, Palantir's contract, which said that it's going to manage the information resources of the U.S. military, is just an astounding example of that. This group owns the AI technology. The Pentagon doesn't have it. So there's another element here which is really quite astounding. The government has to turn to these people to actually put the satellites up, if it's SpaceX, or to actually run the AI and do target assessments for the Pentagon, because there isn't the in-house capability of the American military. So it's actually a small group in California that has the cards, as Mr. Trump likes to say. So this is another element of what is happening. It's all utterly bizarre. Add to the fact that this small group in Silicon Valley owns the major media platforms right now, controls actually the public-facing AI where we, quote, get our information. because you ask a question, you get an answer from Grok or from another AI system that is under the control of a very few people, or you post news on X, or you post news on Facebook. There's an extraordinary, unprecedented concentration of political power, media power, technology power, financial power in a small group. And for whatever reason Musk was on that call, which is completely bizarre, it is a reflection of this fact of who's really in charge in what effectively is a collapse of the constitutional order of the United States.
And add on to American business, the intersection of American business and American foreign policy. There was another article on March 26th in New York, in the New York Times. And since you're in New York, I thought I'll bring this up. The Roosevelt Hotel, that's in Manhattan, and it's owned by the Pakistan government. Now, this was announced by Steve Witkoff that the American government and the Pakistan government are going to jointly redo the Roosevelt Hotel. And then eventually Pakistan is being seen on the high table and are the chief mediators in this West Asia war. How do you see that?
Just as you're implying, completely bizarre, inside trading, absolute collapse of any concept of conflict of interest, everybody profiteering of this small group. I don't know what Kushner's stake in this is, or what he's going to build in Pakistan. Who knows? It's bizarre beyond imagining. Any one of these incidents would have been enough to stop government in the United States in past decades. It is now out of control. And this is exactly what we're seeing. And if the result of this were somehow nasty and devious but clever, it would be one thing. But we're in an era of genocide in Gaza, wars across the Middle East, a worldwide energy crisis. These gangsters don't know how to run anything. That's the reality. And that's what we're facing right now.
Professor Sachs, thank you for your time.
Well, good to be with you. Thanks a lot. Let's hope somehow some grown-ups take some responsibility in this.
I hope so too. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.